Just to give you a short introduction, a few months ago, Judge Poppy called together a couple of people in Bastrop County and let us know about the Lower Colorado River Basin Coalition and asked us to help spread the word within our own communities, which is why we've organized this meeting here today. And just want to share with you my experience about that. So it's kind of like what I call the new car syndrome. You know how once you buy a new car, you start seeing that car everywhere? Like you never noticed it before, but then all of a sudden you're driving down the street and it's like, there's another one, there's another one. So, and I've had a very similar experience to that. Once I started realizing what the issues were, it became very present to me how often people said, oh, we're gonna go take our kids down to the river to go fishing. Just the other day, Stephanie, literally the other day, Stephanie and I are driving across the bridge and she says, look right over there around that bend, there's this great little sandy area that you can go fishing down there. I wish I wasn't so tired because I go fishing tonight. We just got done with casino night, so we were both a little tired. But those things have been brought present to me. My most personal favorite one is when my son sends me a text message and all it says is going down to the rope swing. And those are the kind of connections that we have with our river here in our community. Now I bet that might not be what you expected me to hear expected to hear from me as the Chamber of Commerce president. You probably expected me to talk about how the river and the economic impact that it has on businesses that rely on the river for their livelihood, like Kevin from Hill Country Fly Fishers or Lee from the Bastrop River Company. But I think that stuff is kind of common sense. We all know that folks that rely on the river for their livelihood are in jeopardy right now. And so what I want you to think about today, what I want you to leave with is, what does the river mean to you and your family and your friends and your neighbors? What is the impact that the river has on you? Because right now you have an opportunity to have your voice be heard. You know, it's been presented in the media as an us versus them issue, as you know, the folks up here and the folks down there and kind of struggling for that water in between, but we're in between. And we need our voice to be heard just as much as everybody else's. We may be a small rural community like several along the river, but that doesn't make our needs any less important than other folks. So Judge Poppy and his friends are here today to share some of that information with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you. You've done a very good job so far. I could just continue to sit there and let you chat. This is great to have a wonderful group here tonight to hear about these issues and opportunities that face us in relation to surface water in Bastrop County, in particular here in Smithville. I want to introduce a couple people before we get started tonight. Robert Howard is here with Bluebonnet Electric. He's also a board member of the coalition that we'll be talking about tonight. Mark Rose is another Bastrop County board member, as am I. We have Robbie Cook here, a former legislator, a rice farmer, comes from a rice farming family, and he's doing some work on the public relations and the legislative side of this issue. Susan Knoll is here with Senator Watson's office. Thank you, Susan, for coming tonight. And we appreciate your interest in Bastrop County. I told Senator Watson the other day in a dinner that he invited me to in Austin that I felt really blessed that he had asked me to get together to understand Bastrop County better, because as I said to him, the better he understands Bastrop County and our needs and concerns, the better he can represent us. And I think he really does want to represent us as a county and as part of his constituency. So I'm so thankful you're here tonight, Susan. We have a lot to talk about, and I do want to try to honor your time. Hope to get you out of here by 7:30. We'll allow time at the end of the presentation for questions and answers and that sort of thing. So, you know, my time is yours as far as that goes, but I want to be judicious in the presentation because we have a story to tell. I think it's something that all of Bastrop County needs to know about, and I've had the privilege of telling this story 3 or 4 times already, and I'm scheduled to tell it in Elgin next week. And so we're getting the message out to people all over the county about what the opportunities and issues are here, and we're talking about surface water. There's a sort of tug of war going on for water in the Hilah Lakes and in the Colorado River right now. And you wouldn't be surprised at that because we are nearing the Drought of Record in Central Texas. In fact, as of now, and we'll talk a little bit more about definitions later, but as of now, the drought of record actually happened between about 1947 and 57 in this part of Texas. But in the last 5 years, we've had 3 of the lowest inflow years ever recorded since we've been keeping records of inflows in the Colorado River. So if that continues for very much longer, we will have exceeded the drought of record. The lakes will fall below their previous low limit. We're going to talk some about that. We're going to talk about the water management plan that the LCRA works from as they try to balance the needs of the upper basin and the lower basin and protect life and liberty and limb from flooding and disaster on the river, and at the same time protect all of us from drought and make sure that there's plenty of water for essential needs up and down the river. We will talk a little bit about the TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and their role in this, in the management of the river and the policies that go along in setting how the river is managed. Then finally, we'll talk some about legislative influence and encourage you to be a part of the process. Every elected official, I can tell you this, no matter what level you're on, every elected official wants to hear from their constituency. They want to know how you feel about these issues. And I will guarantee you that all of our representatives will appreciate a kind and respectful and gentle input from us about these essential matters for us. And let me start off by saying, look, we're not mad at anybody. I'm not mad at the Central Texas Water Coalition. Certainly not mad at our elected representatives or the TCEQ. Not mad at LCRA. LCRA is our friend and will continue to be a friend of Bastrop County far into the future. This is not about picking a fight with somebody and trying to get an advantage. This is about educating you as the public and asking you to become a part of the conversation, asking you to join a coalition, to create a voice, to create a force that will give us a little bit more oomph when it comes to talking to the LCRA board or to the TCEQ or to our elected officials. And we'll get more into that a little bit later. Just to kind of give you a broad brush view, here are the statutory counties in the Lower Colorado River Authority. And Bastrop is right here in the middle, just below Travis County. I think if you counted them, you'd find there are 11 now. The blue area is actually the watershed. The rain that falls in this area sheds into the highland lakes if it falls above the dams, or into the river if it falls below the dams. And so that's kind of the district that we're talking about here as it runs up and down. And there's that kind of that tug of war I was talking about. And let me just say a little bit about the Central Texas Water Coalition. It was formed about 4 years ago when there was pressure on the LCRA to modify its water management plan to keep more water stored in the Hilah lakes and release less for interruptible uses downstream. And they wanted some triggers set that would have done that. And at the time, the LCRA chose not to include those triggers that they had recommended in LCRA's proposal to the TCEQ. That was the fuel kind of behind, under their fire that it got them active. And so they began a coalition very similar to what we're talking about here tonight, except it represents folks up around the Hilah Lakes. And for 4 years, they've been building membership, they've been gathering money, and they have done some pretty powerful things. They have done an environmental, an economic impact of what lower lake levels mean for Lake Travis and Lake Buchanan. They have lobbied the legislature and the TCEQ and the LCRA to try to influence water policy as they go forward. Someone asked me the other day, I think RJ asked me how many members the coalition has. In a letter that they wrote to the TCEQ, they claim that they have 3,000 members in the Central Texas Water Coalition. And I do not know what their budget is or what their revenues are. All I know is that as of today, we have somewhere between 70 and 100 members, and we have about $20,000 in the bank. So we are a little bit late to the party. That means we just have to work that much harder to have an influence. Let me just say a little bit about this river as a system and how it's behaved during the recorded time that we're aware of. And I'm going to preface what I'm fixing to say by this. I'm not here to paint a threatening picture in your mind about some imminent flood danger in the Colorado River. That's not our purpose, and that's not my purpose tonight. Anything I say about the behavior of the river is a matter of fact. And most of what I say, I got directly off of LCRA's website. In fact, this information, this comes right off of their website. Over the last 170 years or so, there have been about 80 major floods on the Colorado River Basin. Of course, most of them, and the most devastating ones, happened before the dams were built in the late 1930s. In fact, 3 of the worst ones happened while the dams were being built in the 1930s. We're not going to talk about those. We're going to talk a little bit about what's happened since the dams were built, because that's what we live with today. That's the dynamic that's in play today. In 1952, in the middle of the Drought of Record, we had the rise of record on Lake Travis. In a 14-hour period, Lake Travis rose 57 feet. That is pretty scary. And to understand what that means, I'll show you a graphic here in just a minute about the lakes and what their levels are and so forth. But let me just say that a 57-foot rise in a 14-hour period, that is significant. That's a train wreck. Actually, that is beyond anybody's control. That's nature raging, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I'm saying this because here's what happens. Thank God the dams were there. If they hadn't been, Bastrop and Smithville might not have been here after that event. That 57-foot rise was caught by Mansfield Dam. It was caught in Lake Travis, and that's why we know how much the lake rose in that short period of time. You know, I said that this happened in the middle of the Drought of Record. The Drought of Record meant that the lakes were at record low, all right? About where they are today, actually a little bit lower than they are today. Lake Travis was in the 620 range when this drought happened. Thank God for that. If it hadn't been, that 57 feet would have been more than Lake Travis could handle. Let's see if we can go. Drought of Record. Well, I'm going to do a little bit better job of trying to define some important terms tonight. I made this presentation earlier, and at the end of it, everybody was kind of scratching their head. What does all that mean? What are those fancy words? Drought of Record is simply the drought where the worst climatic and meteorological conditions have existed over a period of time. And it usually can be recognized or rated by the amount of water stored in the lakes. There are other elements that impact the Drought of Record, and one of the big ones is the amount of water inflowing, the inflow into the Hilah lakes. And the in-stream flows, if they are at 0 or close to 0, which is where they are now, then that's a matter of concern, because if the lakes are falling, even though there may be some water in the lakes, if they're falling rapidly, then you will be approaching the Drought of Record. So it's just a matter of what are the worst climatic conditions that have existed during any given period of time. Fortunately, we haven't had many of these. The last serious one was in the 50s, 60 years ago, although we're in about our 7th year of the one that we're in right now. The second major event I want to talk about since the dams were built was in 1991. The Christmas flood, we call it. This is pretty personal for me because I worked at LCRA at the time that this flood happened. Mark Rose was general manager, and I was asked by him to be on a committee to answer the telephone late into the night. This was before internet, before social media. People actually picked up the landline and called and said, "What's going to happen? Am I going to flood? Am I going to wash away tonight?" For hours and hours and hours, night after night after night, we sat there and answered those phones from people upstream and downstream. What's going to happen on the river? How are we balancing the river? And here's why it was such a big concern. In the Christmas flood of 1991, conditions were different. The lakes were almost full when this flood happened. And that means that Travis was about 678 or 680 feet. 681 is considered full for Travis. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But just remember that number, 681 is full. It was almost full. And it started raining. And it kept raining. And it kept raining. And Lake Travis began to rise. And they began to open floodgates to let water out as quickly as they could. But Lake Travis continued to rise. They couldn't open more floodgates because if you open too many, guess what happens through the city of Austin and through Bastrop and Smithville and LaGrange? If you open too many floodgates, the water gets too high down here. And so they have to balance between how much water is being stored in the lakes and how much water is in the river below. Well, the water rose to within 3½ feet of the level of the spillway on Lake Travis. In all the history of the lakes, the water's never gone over that spillway. I'm very glad for that. You are too. Because when water goes over the spillway, we lose all control of it. We have no idea what's going to happen next. And so it was very important to Mr. Rose as general manager to keep that water below the spillway, but to keep the river downstream from flooding. And I can tell you, we had as much pressure from people around the Highland Lakes saying, let more water out, as we had people down here in the lower river saying, keep the water up there, we're up to our necks already. That was the balance that was playing out in 1991, just a few years ago. And so, as we said here, Lake Travis had an inflow, this is right off of LCRA's website, Lake Travis had an inflow of over twice the amount that it will contain. Think about that. Lake Travis contains, when it's full, about 1,100,000 acre feet. Twice that amount flowed through the dams in the Christmas 1991 flood. That is a lot of water that has to be passed down a very narrow basin below Austin. The last one I'll mention is in June of 2007. Many of you remember this. This is yesterday's news. Actually, the 19-inch rain bomb that hit Marble Falls washed out many of their city streets, most of their city culverts and bridges. Massive runoff into Lake Travis. But again, the lake was able to hold that water without overflowing. Here's the setup of the Hilah Lakes. This cutaway illustrates it better than anything I've seen. So we have Lake Buchanan, Inks, LBJ, Marble Falls, Lake Travis, Lake Austin, Town Lake, and then all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Here's Matagorda Bay. Out of all of those lakes, that's a bunch of lakes, out of all those lakes, only 2 of them are designed as water storage reservoirs. The others, Inks, LBJ, Marble Falls, Lake Austin, and Town Lake, or Lady Bird Lake now, are all what's called constant level or pass-through lakes. They don't go up and down much. If it's flooding, they have a little head on them and they'll rise a foot. But normally, they are relatively constant level. So in all the lake system, all the Highland lakes that you hear about, there are only 2 lakes that have any variability in their storage volume. And when Lakes Travis and Buchanan are full, they hold a total of 2.1 million acre feet. I told you a while ago that Travis's is 1.1 million of that. Buchanan is the other 1 million of that. So total storage volume in the Hilah Lakes, 2.1 million acre feet. Again, this comes right off of LCRA's webpage, and I underline the last sentence. Lakes Travis and Buchanan can fill up in a matter of hours during the day during a flood. And so let's talk about water. How much water is an acre foot of water? Well, you all go to the Tiger games. I know you do. I've seen some of you there. If you took a football field, a high school football field, and flooded from the 5-yard line to the 5-yard line, and side to side, you would have about if you flooded it 1 foot deep, you would have 1 acre foot of water. So a football field is little over an acre in size. 5-yard line to 5-yard line is right at an acre in size. If you put a foot of water on it, you have what's called an acre foot of water. You say, well, why did you invent that term? I mean, that's a strange concept. Why do you measure water like that? Well, we measure water like that because there is a lot of water on God's good earth, and you got to have some. If I tried to tell you how much that was in billions of gallons, it wouldn't make any sense to you, or trillions of gallons. It wouldn't make any sense to you. But everybody knows what a football field looks like, and that's an acre-foot of water. Now, how much did I say was stored in those two Hilah lakes? 2.1 million football fields full of water, foot deep. All right. That is a lot of water stored in the Highland Lakes. And yet, keep in mind, in that flood of 1991, twice the volume of Lake Travis came flowing down the river because of the flood. So we have this, this storage model here. Those two lakes hold water for storage. Now, in addition to that, one of the Highland Lakes is designed to hold flood water. That means that there is a pool of air maintained in Lake Travis above the full level, above the 681, and that pool of air is designed to hold flood water up to the spillway. All right? From 681 to 714 is the flood pool. That's 33 feet from full to spillway. That's the flood pool in Lake Travis. And I've calculated that out for you so you don't have to worry about it. That's 760 football fields under 1 foot of water. 760,000 football fields under 1 foot of water. That's a lot of water itself. And yet, remember the number I told you a while ago? Right off of LCR's website, 2 million acre feet came down the river in 1991. They had to manage the river very carefully. And you know Mr. Rose, and I know him too. It's pretty hard to rattle Mark Rose. But I saw him sweat a little bit when he was trying to balance whether to open another floodgate and put water out of the river at Bastrop and Smithville, or to keep that other floodgate closed and be flooding Graveyard Point and some other lakeside communities on Lake Travis. Big balance, big issues, very important. So here's what LCRA says about it. We've learned that we live on a very dangerous river, a river of extremes. And because of that, we have to manage that river very carefully. I'm just telling you some of the issues that are involved in the water management plan that LCRA has to try to execute, that's approved by the TCEQ, and that you and I live with from time to time. There are three major areas I want to talk about in the water management plan, and then we'll move on to the use of the river downstream. First of all, just what it means to be a water management plan. Secondly, what the two classes of water that are defined in the water management plan, and finally, about trigger points, because it's the trigger points that are the big issue these days. A water management plan is simply a carefully devised guide for protecting the basin and using the resource to its maximum benefit. That means we want to make it available for beneficial uses. We want to protect life and property in the process. And we want to fulfill all of the mission that the LCRA was created to fulfill back in 1938 when it was first created. Those are the reason that we have a water management plan today. And the water management plan, again, should be, it is apolitical. It's a-regional. It shouldn't matter which region you're from, upper stream, downstream. All you want to do is do the very best that can be done in managing this very difficult to manage resource that we just talked about. Now, as a part of that, and Robbie was just telling me something of the history of this a while ago, in 1988, there was an adjudication, and a part of the settlement out of that was to define two classes of water: firm water and interruptible water. Firm water is simply water that will be available for beneficial use under all hydrological conditions all of the time. The lakes have a yield of about 430,000 acre feet of firm water. I said that slow because I want you to remember that number. The lakes have a firm yield of 430,000 acre feet. That means every year, no matter what the weather is, no matter what the rain is, no matter what the infall is, there's never been a time in history when there wasn't at least 430,000 acre feet of water available for use for beneficial purposes in this basin from the Highland Lakes. That's why it's called firm water. By definition, it's there all the time. Now, The fact is that there's a lot of firm water contracted for that's never touched. In fact, most of the firm water that's contracted for is never touched. People don't need it yet, but it's there because the City of Austin and others want to be sure they have plenty of water for future growth. I'll just say this at this point, and again, I'm not yelling at anybody. I'm just saying that one thing we need to understand is that this argument has been misplaced. Some folks have wanted to say that this is a fight to protect the firm water for Austin so that it doesn't run out of water and can continue to grow. And so therefore, we need to take the water away from the rice farmers so that the faucets in Austin still work when you turn them on. That is that's misinformation. That's misdirected. That is not the case. We are not anywhere near using up the firm water in the lakes. Remember, I told you the whole year the firm water need is 430,000 acre feet. There are today over 750,000 acre feet in the lakes as we speak. Now that's almost twice as much as you need in any given year. And that's in the middle of a drought, close to the drought of record. So we're not talking about water for faucets and showering and human need in Austin versus irrigation on rice farms in Matagorda Bay, in Matagorda County. That's not what we're talking about. What we're really talking about here is a coalition of people up around the Hilah Lakes who've said, we want more water kept in the Hilah Lakes because we want more water kept in the Hilah Lakes. We like it when there's more water in our lakes. And I think they're abusing this drought and the facts that everybody's having to live with today. They're abusing the situation to try to put some pressure on decision makers, on policy makers, about how the water management plan is going to be shaped. And I think it's very unfortunate. That's part of the reason that I'm involved in this battle. Interruptible water is all the water in those highland lakes up there that doesn't fit the firm water definition. So it's everything that maybe is not there every year in different climatic conditions. Now let's talk about trigger points. This is pretty important because a lot of what's being proposed for amendments to the water management plan have to do with trigger levels. Trigger levels are those lake conditions and climatic conditions under which LCRA would be allowed to release interruptible water downstream. And I mentioned two things, climatic conditions and lake conditions. Used to be that if there was water in the lakes, then at certain volume, then it could be released downstream. Under this proposed plan, though, there is another element, and that is, are the lakes rising or falling? And what have the lakes done in the last 2 years? If it's been 2 years since the lakes were full, then we're going to keep them fuller now to give us more protection for that firm water need. That's at least the message they're telling us. The fact is they're keeping them fuller now. I'll just say it. So their boat docks float level and their jet skis work better. You know, folks, sometimes people can get a little selfish. And I think that's maybe what we're dealing with here. So let's talk about ag use. Interruptible releases for ag use downstream. There are about 70,000 acres or so under irrigation out of the Colorado. Okay, about that. Located in these three counties, Matagorda, Wharton, and Colorado. A lot of these farmers have been in business over 100 years. Before there were any dams on the Colorado River, they were irrigating their rice farms out of this river. When the LCRA was created, the way they got created was that the rice farmers downstream felt confident that by creating lakes up above and storing water, that would just assure their future, that there would always be water for rice farming downstream. And so the rice farmers actually supported the creation of LCRA so that they could assure that they would have water for uses. And the first crop, these are just round numbers, and understand, I just want you to see in relation kind of the numbers we're talking about. First crop would call for about 200,000 acre feet in a normal year. A second crop would call for maybe 50,000 acre feet in a normal year. That's for the farming that goes on in our basin. Now let's talk about those trigger levels. And I've tried to illustrate this with this vial of water here. at the time I made this a couple of months ago, there was actually about 730,000 acre feet in the lake, stored in those two lakes, Travis and Buchanan. And at the time, the existing water management plan said that in the conditions of the drought of record, we're not going to release any water if the lakes are below 600,000 acre feet. Well, that gave us kind of a foundation, a base to talk from. The purple line there represents the 600,000. The last 3 summers, including this summer, LCRA has gone to the TCEQ with an emergency order asking for there to be an adjustment in the water management plan because people were concerned about the low inflows into the Highland Lakes and did not want to pull the Highland Lakes down below a certain level. And part of this came out of, I don't know, Robbie, you might call it a faux pas. You live and learn. If you don't learn, you're not very smart. In 2011, the lakes were relatively low and the inflows were extremely low. But there was water in the lakes, and so rice farmers were trying to farm and they called for water released downstream, and water was released. But that drew the lakes down and the water did not come back into the lakes, and that really set everybody off. They said, we'll never let that happen again. And that's a lot of the fuel behind the Central Texas Water Coalition, to make sure that we don't empty the lakes or pull the lakes down below a reasonable level without being aware of what's happening as far as the inflow goes. And I think all of us are like that too. Nobody in this room wants Austin to ever be out of water. That would not be good for any of us. And so we want to be sensitive to that and be careful with that. But we learned a little bit of something in 2011. So in 2012, 13, and 14, even though there's 750 or so thousand acre feet of storage, LCRA said, we don't want to release any water for farming. And that's been the case. Now the LCRA is recommending a trigger level of about 1,000,001 acre feet of storage in those two lakes. Again, that's pretty conservative. The Hilah Lakes Coalition is saying, no, while we're changing these rules, why don't we just go ahead and set it at 1.4 million acre feet, and then we won't have to ask again. Well, at least not anytime soon, I would hope. I just wanted you to see kind of the relationship here, and I've tried to use relationships. This is where the cutoff has been. This is where they would like for it to be, LCRA's recommendation, and where we've put it in the last 3 years. So that being the case, if that happens, if the 1.4 trigger happens, we think that it will be have devastating impact on the rice industry. The rice industry is interesting for us in that because they've needed water, when water's been available, they've needed water. You release the water to the rice industry, and guess what? It flows right through the middle of Bastrop and Smithville and LaGrange and Wharton, right on down this river. It flushes out the river. It's great for canoeing and kayaking and fishing and every other good thing. It keeps the water cleaner. It flushes out the algae and the water weeds and so forth. And it sort of dilutes the concentration of treated wastewater out of the city of Austin's wastewater plants. We'll talk about that in a minute as well. So having water released down that river is a very good thing for us for a lot of reasons. Now, I won't say too much about this because Senator Watson and I had some very frank conversations about this slide, I'll have to tell you. And I want to be careful. I'm not saying that I have scientific evidence that shows that if more water is stored in the Hilah Lakes, that the floods are going to be bigger in Bastrop County. But you know what? I'm not a scientist, but I am a thinking person. And I've had the bathtub run over before at my house. And I know that if it's fuller when it starts, it doesn't take as much water to run it over at the end. So we have these issues about Highland Lakes and flood protection. You have the floods of 91 and 52. You have the reason for flood control, protecting people and property. You have the Corps of Engineers, who are very interested in protecting the dams themselves. And there are certain conditions under which LCRA's water management plan goes out the window and the Corps of Engineers take over. And again, I'll just tell you this as a matter of fact. I'm not trying to overstate this case, but I'm telling you that when the water rises to the level that it begins to exit the spillway, Corps of Engineers steps in. And they've said, you know, we're to the point where we can't control the flow anyway. It's very important for us to protect this infrastructure of this dam, and we're going to do whatever that takes to protect this infrastructure. All I'm saying is, folks, we never want that to happen. We never want to get even close to that happening. Now, our friends up around the Hilah Lakes are saying we never want to get anywhere close to the Hilah Lakes being empty so that you turn the water on and there's nothing comes out of the faucet. Okay, I understand that message, but I hope they understand our message as well. We have a legitimate concern, and I, as the officer in this county responsible for for disaster response, whether it be flood or fire, I lay awake at night thinking about the impacts of what too much water in that lake could do. So we want to realize that 681 Lake Travis is full, 714 goes over the spillway. That's only 33 feet. We've had floods. We've had floods since the dams have been built, that if they had fallen when that lake was full, it would have gone over the spillway. I just think we've got to be aware of that. Higher levels, to me, equal greater risk. Now, this is a picture all of you will recognize. This is our fair town right here. There's the bus barn. We're right here, by the way. This is flood of 91. So the river got up out of its banks and flooded out toward the airport, up Gaisley Creek, all around by the high school. So you know what it's like when the river rises up out of its banks. This was the summer of 2013, taken from the old iron bridge in Bastrop. No irrigation releases last summer, and so we had a very hot, dry summer, and the river pretty much grew over with algae and water weeds. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. It's possible that if everything went their way and everything went against us, it's possible that we could be looking at a scenario in which the Hilah Lakes would be full most of the time. Our river would be 90% effluent 90% of the time. That is not a good formula for our success, for our future, and that's why we need your voice in this coalition. So what does the Colorado River mean to the lower basin? This is a picture of the river as it passes below Matagorda into the Gulf. This is a picture of Matagorda Bay, where at Jensen Point, where the Colorado River enters into Matagorda Bay. I've put some notes here. There is a target of 1 million acre-feet a year of raw flow into Matagorda Bay. What that does is keeps the salinity level in check so that the shrimp and blue crab have a chance to grow and breed and reproduce. And so the target is 1 million. Critical, if it gets below 171,000 acre-feet a year, then it's very critical for those environmental issues. That picture is compliments of Mr. Saturn. Here is that nursery we were talking about, the marshes in Matagorda Bay. And again, that freshwater flow is essential to maintaining the correct salinity levels in that basin. The lower river is well known, actually nationwide, for its sport hunting and fishing. It's a wonderful environment and is used, all the water that passes through here on down the river gets used many different ways. If it's called for irrigation, we get to enjoy it while it passes through our county. It passes through the irrigation fields. The tailwater of the irrigation fields goes back into the river and into the bay to nourish the bay and to cut the salinity level. So it gets used 3 or 4 times as it goes down the river. It's a good thing to have plenty of water in the river. And of course, the coastal rice industry we talked about earlier. That's an industry that's pretty much on the ropes right now. This is the 3rd year in a row they've had no water. But now let's talk about what the river means to Bastrop County. And I just wanted to illustrate a couple of things. Thanks to Tom Bettis for this beautiful picture. There's the old Tin Man. That's hometown, isn't it, Tina? That's where your son has the rope swing and where your kids go down and play in the water or fish. This river is a natural resource, and I'll have to say that we maybe haven't taken advantage of it as much as we should have or could have or will. but it's a wonderful resource. It's also a wild river at times, and so it's a little bit hard to control. You know, we built that, I was not kin to Alan Poppy, but I claimed kin because it was too hard to explain why I wasn't kin. So June Poppy, his wife, had the idea of building a walk along the Colorado River in Bastrop. It's called the June Poppy Riverwalk, actually, if you go by there. And we built that, and while we were building it, we had a flood and washed out the part that we'd built. So it's a rough river. I mean, it's not a domesticated river. It still can be challenging to work with, but it's a resource that we need to do better with, and I think we will in the future. We have wonderful opportunities for boating up and down the river. Look at this. Isn't that a great shot? That bass was caught on the Colorado above Austin, above Bastrop, near the Hyatt Regency. So, and then just all kinds of family fun. I think Lee Harley was mentioned earlier. Lee has come to town, and others have done this before Lee, but he's the one here now, really promoting the river for recreation and other purposes, and I'm so thankful for that because it's a new kind of commerce. It actually, it's the kind of commerce that all of us like. It's clean industry, and it puts heads in beds, and so it keeps people here. They eat in our restaurants, they buy our gas at our gas station, and then they go home. And then maybe they come back next weekend or next summer to do the same thing. So it's a wonderful, good, clean industry. Then recreation. The river can be used more than it has been. If it has cleaner water in it, I think more families would use it. How many have been down the river on a boat or a kayak or... Wow, that's at least half, more than half. In the 32 years I've been here, I've been down the river twice in a john boat, once in a canoe, and once in a kayak. I spent in the canoe, I spent more time in the water than I did in the canoe. These kayaks are great. By the way, the river's being used for some competitions now, and in fact in August, there's going to have the stand-up cup, the SUP Cup, and this, again, a brainchild of Lee Harley and his group, so people will be coming from all over the state to compete in this wonderful event on the river. So we're here tonight to ask you for your help. Help save our river as we know it, as we love it, and as we see not what we've just done with it, but what the potential is for what we can do with it. You say, well, how can we help? We wanted to create this coalition, Lower Colorado River Basin Coalition, to bring voices together in the 5 counties below Austin to say, we're here too. We have an interest in what happens with the water management plan and the issues that happen at the Capitol. That's important to us as well. We want to have a voice in that. Now, we may not get our way all the time, but we do want to have a say all the time in what goes on. And so help us save our river. How can you do that? Well, the Lower Basin Coalition, and I asked Robbie to say a few words about any of these things that he wants to expand on. It's a loose-knit coalition. That means that you don't have to sign up that, well, I believe in everything that the rice farmers do, or I'm for waterfowl hunting in Matagorda County. Don't have to say all of that. You're not committing to support everybody else's industry. You're just saying, I'm willing to work together with other people who want water in this river to call for that and to have a voice. And so it's farmers, environmentalists, sportsmen, recreational users, communities, and developers. And I will say that Smithville and Bastrop, the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation, all 5 counties below Austin are members of the coalition. And I think by now, if not all, almost all of the cities and chambers of commerce up and down the river are members of the coalition. The board is made up of local leaders who work for you, who will speak for you, who are interested in knowing what you want to know, what you want us to know, and how we can help have an impact as these policies are developed going forward. Our purpose is very simple. Keep the fresh water flowing. That's really what we want. Figure out a way. Let's be fair. And that really has to do with our next point, and that is values. Share the resource. There's water in the basin. There's going to be water. There's going to be too much water in the basin. So share the resource in times of good as well as times of bad. share the resource. That's all we're really asking for as a coalition. And our mission is simply to support downstream interests in the Colorado River. I think all of us can support those things. And because they're generic enough that it's something that all of us can work together on. And so here's the call to action. And then we'll take your questions and stay as long as you want. We're asking you to join the coalition. Someone came in tonight and handed us a check for $100 with their application, and thank you for that. And if there's others who want to do that tonight, that's fine. You can also go online. Did everybody get a brochure? They've been passed out. If you didn't get them, we have a few more here. It'll have the website on there, and you can go online. You can actually sign up online and make a donation there. Robert's handing those out if you'd like to have a brochure. This is just a kind of high-level pictorial about what the coalition is trying to do. Secondly, what we'd like for you to do is use your voice individually, your social media, to reach out and tell our story. Take pictures on the river, post them on Facebook. Do your tweeter thing. I don't tweet. Do you tweet? I don't tweet. I'm in the wrong generation.
Somebody might tweet back.
I'm afraid they would squawk. That would be a squawk if they came back. So, but use whatever you use. I'd still do the old-fashioned email thing. Just make it something that you think about and talk about. And I just loved your comment, Tina, how that the new car syndrome. I want you to be aware of the river every day of the year. As you pass over that bridge, or if you walk down by there on your evening walk or whatever, think about the river and how it impacts your life, how it enriches your life, how it makes Smithville a better community, how it's a blessing to Bastrop County. And because as we think about it, we will get involved in doing something about it. And then I'm going to ask you a third thing, and that is to be willing to speak up with our friends at the LCRA and the TCEQ concerning water issues that are precious to you. Your story is the best thing you can tell. How has the river enriched your life? How's it changed your life? How's it made you and made this a better community? And if you can just take a few minutes and put that in a paragraph and send that to, go to our website. We'll have the contact information for the commissioners of the TCEQ and for the board members of the LCRA and also our elected officials that represent us. If you will just touch them with your story, it'll do more than I could do, because those personal interest stories make a difference. And so reach out and be a part of it. And then finally, don't be afraid to ask the people that we've elected to represent us, to understand our concerns and needs, and to do all they can to balance those concerns and needs with the concerns and needs of everybody else they represent, but at least they know what we're asking for, where we stand, what we need. That's our story, folks. That's the Lower Colorado River Basin Coalition. That's what we're here for. That's what we're asking you to be a part of if you have a will to. By the way, there are several levels of membership. I think $25 up to thousands of dollars. Whatever level is comfortable for you. It's not so much the money as it is the fact that you are joining your voice with ours and with others to be able to say, we care about our river. These issues are important to us, and we want to have a voice.
Well, I want to thank Judge Poppy and for doing a wonderful job. Not only, he got this presentation down pat, obviously, the third or fourth time, and you can tell that he's a man who's coming at this from his heart. And the coalition, I'll tell you a little bit. First of all, give some credit where credit's due. Here the last several years, the rice industry, those upstream have chosen, everybody needs a village to get something accomplished. So it's been, as the judge talked about, kind of between upstream, Hilah Lakes folks, the rice industry. And all of a sudden, a few of the judges here recently have started talking, other leaders, other mayors, and said, well, wait a minute, what's happening to the river? Is this going to be something that could happen long term? So here a while back, Ducks Unlimited, which is very, very, very afraid of what could happen if you have 70,000 acres of rice basically go away, or even 35,000 acres of rice go away. What happens to all the waterfowl, the shorebirds, the wading birds, and then the basin estuary? So what this coalition wanted to accomplish was that it wasn't just about a few rice farmers. You know, that's okay. We understand that a lot of people don't understand where this water's been going. Well, the rice industry has purchased the water, the interruptible water, for all of these years. So during the summers, the rice farmers purchase the water, it slows down the river, has all of its other direct and indirect benefits, and that's always just been the case. Even during some drought periods, the lake levels have been drawn down during the summer season, and then when the rain started getting in the fall, and certainly in the springs, they kind of fill back up. And it's been a way that LCRA has managed for many years. And one of the things that the rice industry does understand, and not here just as a spokesperson for the industry, is how important it is to make sure the City of Austin, the firm customers, the drinking water, the essential water uses, that's firm, that's there, and that should always be protected. As the judge said, it's just how much protection does there need to be, and then during a drought situation, are they going to go too far where you're going to cause long-term drought conditions downstream? And that's really one of the points, one of the heart that the judge was talking about. The last 3 years have been, ever since 2011, and the last 3 years have been some of the driest on record, with zero inflows coming into the Highland lakes. The downstream industry actually recognized this, and for lack of a better word, acquiesced to the emergency orders, realizing that because of the low inflows in 2011 and another in 2012, another in 2013, that these emergency orders were necessary. They didn't get up there, they didn't necessarily, they went through one contested case because of the trigger levels. Okay, so what everybody, the judge said, what folks are worried about downstream now is, are we going to have a perennial drought situation caused downstream? Because there's an opportunity here to do so. So we're not trying to vilify anybody. The coalition was formed not just because you all see the name Kirby Brown with Ducks Unlimited and some of the rice industry folks downstream. What's exciting about this coalition, a little bit about my background, I used to represent Bastrop County. And I was hoping to see a few people like this because everybody knows who. Don't need any mark, but sometimes it's a good thing in politics. Represented Bastrop County for 12 years. Before that, I was mayor of the city of Eagle Lake and city council member. And there's coalitions sounds like a really, a neat, warm, fuzzy feeling type of word. And this coalition was formed to a certain extent in reaction to another coalition. I hope that this coalition, well, even when the water management plan comes and goes, will keep going. Because if you look at some of the members of this coalition, it is one of the broadest based coalitions I've ever seen formed. You got environmental groups, you have ag groups, you have business, industry, county government, city governments, developers. You got people from, I don't know how much more broad that you could get. I doubt the city of Austin is going to form our coalition, but join ours, but you never know. It is exciting to try to work on something like this, and I think the future of all of us down here depends on, to a certain extent, the voices and the success that we have.